if obviously looking at the Irish origins of civilization, the question carries on and says, if we assume Egypt was the origin, because it is the center of the landmass of Pangaea, but before the pole shift of 12,000 years ago, do you think Ireland was at the center, and how would that affect the location of Atlantis?
Well, I have no doubt about the fact that Atlantis was where most people do say it was,
Yeah.
which is in the North Atlantic, and it included the land masses of what we know to be Britain, Britain, Norway and Scandinavia, and Iceland and Greenland and Siberia. That entire landmass up there, or a good huge part of what is Greenland, Iceland, and Britain, was part of Atlantis. What happened to those land masses, every specialist has a different idea. There's some people who say it sank beneath the waves. There's others go, no, that's geologically not possible. Blah, 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 blah. We can get into all of that. It's really, to me, it's largely immaterial. The fact is, it isn't there anymore. But
Yeah.
the memory of it is. And then, so Egypt is just one of these colonies, to speak very specifically of what I wrote in the book, is that the northwest, which would have been Atlantis or Hyperborea or Ultima Thule or Avalon, whatever you want to call it, was hit so badly. And you can see the evidence in Argyllshire. You can see the evidence up there in Scotland. It was devastated more than any other place in the world. The fossil record, even the official geologists like Agassiz and Lyell, they even have accepted this, that the lands of the northwest, Britain, and the forests of the Arctic, this was where the greatest cataclysms took place. And it basically denuded the habitat, meaning that the people who were Aboriginal, who lived there, who would have been the descendants of the Atlanteans, had to leave. And not only that, but even in the subsequent turmoils, because the devastation in the ancient times was so bad that there was recurrent cataclysms. We know this. And therefore, there was waves and waves of people who left the British Isles to move down into Europe and the East. So this accounts for what have been called the Celts. This accounts for the incredibly interesting group, the Hurrians, the Hittites, the Babylonians, Sumerians, Amorites, and ultimately the Egyptians. These great civilizations, I believe, were transported. In fact, even it's been now discovered that the cave paintings in Lascaux, just like Commons Beaumont always said they would, they were not by cave people. They were actually by sophisticated Nordic and British people who, while residing in those caves temporarily, meaning on their way elsewhere, but having to take shelter from the cataclysms, the aftermath of these cataclysms, lived temporarily in these caves, and then drew on the cave walls the animals that were common in North Europe at that time, which is what happened. And we know this now because they found identical cave drawings in Egypt dated to 15,000 years BC. Identical. Now, wait a minute. By the officialdom, those paintings in Lascaux are meant to be just cave-dwelling primitives. What are they doing? The exact same paintings discovered recently, were only discovered 2 years ago. I have it on the forum. In Egypt, identical images, and they were 15,000 years dated. So we know that 15,000 years and prior to that, which ties in beautifully with the consensus over when these catastrophes took place. So the movement down into the places like Egypt and Syria, Syria actually even means the land of the Westerners,
Yeah.
Iran. Do you know that the word Ireland or Aryan is Ariland, and the word Iran are from the same root, meaning Aryan?
That's it. Or
Right.
as well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, whatever way you look at it, passing the Zagros Mountains, the Scythian people, all of this is descendant from this. So it's not that there was a center, there was epicenters now. It was wherever life could sustain, wherever land could sustain life. Some good for a while, some not so good. Aridity, we have to factor in aridity. I did this in the Atlantis DVD, where we factor in the whole fact that some areas that were good for a few hundred years or a few thousand years immediately change, or not immediately, but over time they change and become uninhabitable. This has happened in the last, since the, the Neolithic period. This has happened repeatedly. As I said, the sinking of the land bridges, which has now played into the hands of these scholars, the false university people who pretend that Britain and the Isle of Lewis and Scotland and the Hebrides, you see in Orkney, oh, well, can't you see? Those are very remote places. They have played no role in civilization. Well, yes, they did. If the land bridges from northern Scotland connected with Norway, which the highest brass in geology now from the universities of Norway have discovered is the fact, well, then that's another devastating piece. If there's a land bridge between England and Ireland, which has been discovered, if there's a land bridge between southern England and France, which they know is there, then all this palaver for hundreds of years since the Roman times of the significance of England and Britain in world history dramatically changes. And I believe that as every day goes by, you will have the official people coming up. But see, the thing that distinguishes me is that I'm very glad for modern scientists to come up and prove all of this. You know, that, okay, we can now look at this and new discoveries point to this. And I've got the discoveries on my forum. There they are. But the thing that distinguishes me is that I don't forget about the Commons Beaumonts and the Conor McDorries, guys who died in poverty and unknown, who were saying it years ago and were suppressed. Nothing discovered newly really is new.
Completely.
Yeah. It's interesting, actually, because I watched a mainstream, I think it was a BBC programme just in the last week or two, that was showing them dredging ancient artefacts up from the English Channel and trying to squeeze it into the zeitgeist. Oh, yes, we knew all about that sort of thing. It's been absolutely denied in mainstream history for decades.
But they use the media. We talked about this earlier with the new discoveries about the sun. It's bittersweet for them. By not admitting it, they are threatened. They leave themselves vulnerable to either a maverick insider or a complete outsider to come and throw it in their face, which has been done so many times now that they are aware of it. And if they do publish it, of course, the backlash of that is it overthrows a lot of previous. So they don't know what to do. They're like stuck. But by not publishing any of it, by not leaking it and saying, we're the lads, see, at least if they leak it, they can say, it leaked from our sources. It's still officialdom. We're telling you that there's junk DNA. Oh, no, wait a minute, sorry. That junk DNA tomorrow they'll tell you is the ancient DNA that connects to a much greater form of consciousness. You see, everything that the alternative people have talked about will come to pass. It already has, and the quantum scientists have discovered that what mystics were saying has always come to truth. What the ancient Vedic people were saying, there's so many examples of this when they deal with ESP. There's not a thing that they are not going to prove, but the fact is they will try to do it under their own banner. They will try to give the new person who's never read any of this stuff, doesn't know any of this stuff, the new generation is vulnerable because they'll present all of this as we are the authority. We are the ones to tell you. Isn't it wonderful? All these new generation people will never even realize you have had centuries and centuries and centuries of disseminating lies